She didn't flinch when the F-22s locked on. 3 jets. 1 woman. No backup. They thought she was lost, outdated, maybe even dangerous. Then she said her call sign, and the entire sky went silent. Why did one name turn a hostile formation into an honor guard? The radio hissed with command tone. Unidentified aircraft, you are in violation. Prepare to be grounded. But she didn't flinch. She didn't even reach for the mic. They assumed it was arrogance. They assumed she didn't belong up here, because they couldn't see the woman behind the canopy. Only her skin, only her plane, and their assumptions would be their lesson. Captain Maya Bellamy had learned long ago what it meant to be invisible in the Air Force. Not because she lacked rank, not because she lacked experience, but because her brilliance flew behind a face they weren't trained to salute. 10 years ago, during a mission the Pentagon still denied ever happened, she had rewritten aerial combat under fire. 1 pilot, 12 enemies, 0 backup, 68 lives saved, but no medal, no press, just a sealed folder, a whispered nickname, Ghost, and a quiet discharge with honors that felt more like an erasure. Today, Maya flew her restored trainer jet not for applause, but for silence. It was the only place that didn't ask for ID. But now, that silence cracked as radar warnings shrieked and HUD lights flashed red. Her flight path, cleared hours ago, was suddenly marked as restricted. How convenient. Through the haze of clouds, 3 angular shapes emerged, sharp against the sky. F-22s. Brand new, sterile. Probably piloted by boys who had never flown without auto-stabilizers. She shook her head slowly. This was familiar. The lead pilot, his voice smug, keyed the channel. Looks like someone's grandma borrowed a museum piece. Cute. No response from Maya. She let them speak. Let them gloat. Let them reveal themselves before she reminded them who she was. The second pilot chimed in, laughter in his voice. You sure she's not on a joyride, Commander? Might want to get her a wheelchair instead of a wingman. The third added, that thing barely belongs in the air. What's she running on, memories? Their voices crackled with youth and ignorance. And still, she said nothing. Because Maya had flown in skies where enemies didn't insult. They just tried to kill. She'd been mocked before, by instructors, by commanders, by men who thought her presence diluted the cockpit, until she flew circles around their expectations. But today, she wasn't here to prove anything. She was just passing through, until the system, once again, decided she didn't belong. A final warning hit the comms. Civilian jet. Reduce altitude or be escorted down. You have 10 seconds to comply. Her fingers hovered above the mic. The countdown had begun. But she wasn't in a hurry. Let them feel their grip tighten a little more. Let the silence stretch. And then, her voice came through calm, low, and sharp as a scalpel. Viper Flight, this is Commander Maya Bellamy. Call sign, Ghost Line. Dead silence. One of them stuttered. Did she just say, Ghost Line? Another whispered, no way. That's just a story. The HUD lock-on vanished. All weapons systems disengaged. Because some names, when spoken aloud, don't just command respect. They stop the sky from breathing. And at 30,000 feet, the only thing louder than her name was their sudden silence. Ghost Line, confirm your identity. The voice on the frequency wasn't young anymore. It had authority. And something else. Fear. Maya didn't answer right away. She let the moment breathe. Let it weigh on them. She had learned long ago that the most powerful truths didn't need to shout. They just needed to be believed. Confirmed, she said. Commander Maya Bellamy. Serial 8431 Zulu. Former Strike Squadron Lead. Classified Detachment Nighthawk. There was a soft gasp on the open comm. One of the Raptors banked slightly out of formation. Instinct or awe, she couldn't tell. But she saw it. In a control room miles below, red lights began flickering. Grey Rock Air Command, the very base that once erased her name, was now scrambling to explain how a ghost had returned to their sky. Viper Flight, disengage, came the order. Maintain escort position. Do not challenge. Repeat, do not engage. Inside his jet, Lieutenant Gregory Hawthorne, the one who'd called her grandma minutes ago, sat frozen. His thumb had been resting on the weapons toggle. Now, it hovered, limp. "Sir, that's impossible. She's flying an L-39 for God's sake." "No," came the older voice again. "That L-39 flew into history. 12-to-1 odds. Desert air. 40 minutes of combat. Every maneuver. Textbook now, but back then? Unimaginable." Another pilot whispered, "But I thought she was court-martialed. Or killed." "No," someone else replied, lower still. "She was forgotten." Maya heard it all, and she remembered every face that had pretended not to see her. Every mission debrief where her name was omitted. Every medal ceremony she was invited to. As a seat filler. This was no comeback. This was a reminder. She adjusted her throttle gently. The albatross surged forward with surprising grace. Her hands moved without hesitation. Every muscle memory a dance with wind and gravity. Ahead, the clouds broke open like a slow curtain. And for a second, she flew alone again. Until a quiet voice entered the frequency. "Ma'am, I need to apologize." It was Hawthorne. Maya didn't answer. "I was out of line," he continued. "We didn't know who you were." "That's the thing," Maya finally said. "You didn't ask." Silence again. Behind her, the Raptors settled into formation, no longer as enforcers, now as followers. Escort, not command. Just like it should have been. In the distance, her radar pinged 3 new signals. 2 F-35s, 1 older F-16, veteran birds, coming in fast but with precision. No threat, just presence. Grey Rock Control's voice returned, nervous, overly polite now. "Commander Bellamy, you are cleared for your current flight path. Do you require escort support?" "Negative," she replied. "I've flown harder skies alone." There was a pause, then, "Understood. We're honored to have you in our airspace." Maya exhaled, slow and deep. She had heard 100 fake salutes in her life. This wasn't one of them. And still, somewhere in the cold, pressurized hum of the cockpit, she knew this moment wasn't just for her. It was for every pilot who looked like her but had to fly twice as hard to be seen once. Behind her, Lieutenant Hawthorne switched to the private channel. His voice low, without ego now. "Ma'am, that mission, Nighthawk, is it true what they say? That you flew solo against a dozen interceptors?" Maya closed her eyes for a breath, then opened them to the endless blue ahead. "What do they say exactly, Lieutenant?" "They say you were hit, bleeding, that you stayed in the fight for 40 minutes and turned an ambush into history." Maya didn't answer immediately, because some wounds, even legendary ones, don't close when the fighting stops. But eventually, she spoke. "They say I was outnumbered, that I outflew them, that I changed the outcome. And is it true?" Maya looked at her instruments, at the Raptors in silent trail, at the ghost of her younger self sitting beside her. "No," she said. "It's not true." A pause. "It was worse." It was worse. Her words didn't echo. They landed. Inside Hawthorne's helmet, a silence formed that wasn't mechanical. It was shame. "Permission to ask, ma'am," he began cautiously. "Why wasn't it ever documented?" Maya didn't laugh. She'd stopped laughing about it years ago. "Because I did everything they said was impossible, while being someone they were never prepared to credit." Catch her slipping. But they forgot one. She remembered the sound of her own breath behind a cracked mask that night, the static in her headset, the blood dripping from her temple, and the silence after the 12th enemy aircraft disappeared from her radar. One by one, like ghosts folding into the dark. She had radioed for extraction. Silence. She had requested medical. Silence. And when she landed? One clipboard. No eye contact. No debrief. Just, "You're lucky. You lived." But it wasn't luck. It was grit, skill, fury. And it should have earned her a medal the size of a moon. Instead, it earned her a sealed file and a promotion that never came. Hawthorne's voice came again, quieter. They said the pilot of that mission was unstable, refused command afterward. Maya tilted her head slightly, watching the way his Raptor floated respectfully behind her now. They didn't like that I asked questions, she said. They called it disobedience. I called it survival. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Below them, the other jets had drawn near. The F-35's on her wings now. The F-16 slightly above, its nose tilted down as if bowing mid-flight. She recognized that silhouette. It was an old Air Guard configuration. No younger pilot would have flown that bird. And sure enough, a raspy voice hit the frequency, cracking slightly under age and memory. Ghost line. Been a long time. Maya blinked. Who is this? Doesn't matter. I flew with 168th Tactical. You don't remember me, but I remember you. I watched you take on 12 MiGs over the red border. I watched you fly broken. Maya's throat tightened. She almost whispered. You were there? I saw the sky bleed that night, he said, and you stitched it back together. The words weren't protocol. They weren't briefed. They were truth. And for the first time in a decade, Maya let her hand drift to the worn patch on her shoulder. The faded outline of the Ghostline call sign, half scraped off during years of silence. She wasn't supposed to exist. But now the sky itself was remembering her. Below them, Grey Rock Tower crackled again. Ghostline. We have incoming messages from squadron veterans across 5 states, all requesting flyby formation. Maya shook her head gently. Tell them no ceremony, just airspace, acknowledged. But Commander, if I may, why now? Her fingers hovered over the throttle. She wasn't flying to prove anything. She was flying so no one could bury her again. I didn't ask for this flight, she said. The system rerouted me. And it had. The GPS error. The unlisted restriction zone. She saw it now. They'd tried to test her. To thing. She never left the sky. And this time, she wasn't the only one watching. The old pilot returned to the channel one last time. Ma'am, permission to fly on your 6? Maya smiled slightly, unseen. Permission granted. Just try to keep up. For a few minutes they flew in formation. Not as superiors, not as subordinates, just pilots. Maya's L-39 cut through the sky with a grace that defied its age. The F-22s and F-35s flanked her like younger siblings, faster, sharper, but quieter now. Behind her, the old F-16 held its line like it had something to prove, or protect. But Maya wasn't thinking about the formation. She was thinking about the silence that came after glory. The kind that doesn't feel peaceful, just permanent. Years ago, after Operation Nighthawk, she'd sat in a debriefing room for 4 hours. Not one question, not one recognition. Just a series of neutral expressions behind polished nameplates. They told her the mission had never officially occurred, and then asked her to sign away her memory. She had. Because what choice did she have? She'd been a black woman in a squadron that thought she was a quota. She flew cleaner, shot sharper, reacted faster. But they'd called her intense. Hard to manage. Too silent. As if silence was something she hadn't earned after surviving the impossible. Now, years later, they were calling her again, not with orders, but with regret. Grey Rock Command came on again. Ghostline, this is Colonel Raymond. I wasn't in command back then, but I've read enough. You should have never been left out of that history. Maya didn't answer. He continued, slower this time. We're requesting permission to add your call sign to the Hall of Valor. She exhaled, not in relief, in restraint. Because the truth was, they weren't offering respect. They were cleaning a record they'd helped dirty. This isn't about me, she said into the radio. It never was. But, you want to honor me? Maya cut in. Change the pipeline. Fix the gatekeeping. Stop losing talent because it doesn't wear the face you expect in the cockpit. No one responded. The silence, again, was loud. The F-22 on her right dipped slightly, a subtle, almost reverent motion. Captain Chen's voice came through, gentle and steady. "Ma'am, I transferred into air combat because of a story I heard about a black female pilot who saved 68 lives solo. They never told us her name, but we all knew. Now I know it was you." Maya's throat closed for a beat. "How long have you known?" she asked. "I saw the maneuver on footage during training. Nobody else could fly that pattern. Not then. Not now." Maya felt the burn behind her eyes, but blinked it away. Above her, clouds began to thin, revealing distant ridgelines and sun-split valleys below. This was the zone she'd crossed during the original mission. The sky looked unchanged, but she wasn't. "Ghost Line, this is Professor Ruth Grant, civilian advisor, retired colonel, and former diversity ops lead." The voice was older, strong, and unmistakably black. Maya jolted. "Ma'am," she said, almost involuntarily. "You don't owe them your pain, Commander. You already paid in full." "I never got to thank you," Maya whispered. "You weren't supposed to. My job was to open a door. Yours was to fly through it." The line crackled, then steadied. "They tried to bury your name, but you carried it higher than any of them ever flew." Maya closed her eyes, and for a second she wasn't Ghost Line. She was just the daughter of a man who never got to see her graduate flight school. A girl who traced sky trails with her finger at age 6. A woman who waited 3 decades to hear another black woman say, "I see you." And now, the whole sky was listening. They had tried to forget her, but the sky didn't. And now, neither could the world. By the time Maya's formation crossed into civilian airspace, her call sign had already gone viral. Aviation channels lit up like a flare. Pilots across 3 states switched to open frequency just to hear her voice. And one phrase kept echoing across encrypted comms: "She's real." In the control tower of Juniper Ridge Civil Airfield, a young black technician stood up from her desk, headset half off. "Ma'am," she whispered to her supervisor. I think Ghost Line just requested landing clearance." Within minutes, phones rang at Pentagon press desks. Journalists who'd spent years chasing whispers of a pilot who didn't exist were suddenly asking the same question: who buried her? Maya's L-39 descended like a ghost returning to Earth. No sirens, no honor guard, just silence, the kind that felt sacred this time. She touched down smooth, wheels humming like memory. The Raptors and F-35s formed a protective arc behind her, hovering above like sentinels of history. When she opened the canopy, there were no cheers, just dozens of eyes, young cadets, stunned techs, and even a few retired vets, frozen in awe. Some had trained with her. Some had only heard legends. All of them knew now. She stepped onto the tarmac slowly, helmet tucked under her arm, hair damp with sweat and sunlight. No rank on her sleeve. But none was needed anymore. Lieutenant Hawthorne approached, visibly shaken but composed. "Commander, the Secretary of the Air Force is requesting a private debrief." He hesitated. "Or an apology." Maya looked at him. Really looked. And saw not a cocky young pilot, but a man unlearning what the system had taught him. "I'm not interested in apologies," she said quietly. "I'm interested in who gets remembered, and who gets rewritten." Behind him, Captain Chen and the old F-16 pilot stood in loose formation. But now, they weren't protecting her. They were honoring her. Someone stepped forward from the crowd, a woman in civilian clothes with silver braids and calm authority in her stance. It was Professor Grant. She didn't salute. She extended a hand. "Welcome home, Ghost Line." Maya took it, not because she needed grounding, but because legacy, like flight, is something that travels better when shared. A few feet away, cadets were whispering among themselves. One held a phone. Another stared at the black L-39 like it was a myth made of metal. And Maya heard the word pass from one to another. She flew alone, but carried all of us. That night, in an unofficial hangar gathering lit only by orange halogen lights and reflections off old aircraft metal. Something changed. Not in policy, but in hearts. A young black female cadet stood with trembling hands and asked, "Ma'am, do you think someone like me could ever fly like that?" Maya knelt slightly, eye to eye. "Don't fly like me," she said. "Fly like you. But don't let anyone tell you the sky doesn't recognize your name." Then she stood, took one final look at her L-39, and walked back toward the hangar lights. And just behind her, quietly, a whisper broke from one of the Raptors. "Permission to fly under her call sign?" Hawthorne looked at him. "No," he said, steady and clear. "You earn that name. You don't borrow it." 6 months later, the sky was quieter, but not silent. At the Air Force Academy, in a wide briefing hall filled with crisp uniforms and young ambition, a new photo had been mounted on the far wall. It showed a black L-39 trainer jet, surrounded by Raptors, wings aligned, formation perfect. And at its center, the shadow of something never meant to be seen again. Commander Maya Bellamy stood beneath it now. No medals, no dress blues, just the woman. As she always had been, uninvited, unshaken. Before her sat an entire graduating class. Rows of pilots, some barely out of childhood, others marked by deployments still too fresh to forget. She looked at their faces, some curious, some reverent, but none dismissive. "Who can tell me what makes a call sign legendary?" she asked. A cadet raised his hand. "Exceptional flying skill, ma'am, and surviving combat." Maya gave a small smile, not amused, but understanding. "That's what makes a pilot, not a legend." She walked slowly across the room, boots echoing on the tile. A call sign becomes legendary when it carries every battle no one saw. Every rule bent because someone else had the privilege of breaking them first. Every time you were told to step aside, and you flew straight through anyway. She paused at the edge of the projector light. "Mine wasn't forged in glory. It was forged in silence, and silence is heavier than steel when it's built to erase you." There wasn't a sound in the room, not even breath. One female cadet near the back raised her voice, nervous but clear. "Ma'am, did you ever want to stop?" Maya looked at her, really looked, and saw a girl she once was. "I wanted to stop every day, and I did stop, for a while. But the sky didn't. So I came back." She stepped toward the screen, pointing at her own image mid-formation. "That day, those Raptors didn't fly behind my plane because it was fast. They flew because, for the first time, they understood whose shoulders they'd been standing on all along." Another hand went up. A male cadet. "Do you think AI will make pilots like you irrelevant someday?" Maya tilted her head slightly. "Tech will always change, but the sky doesn't trust code. It trusts instinct. And instinct," she said softly, "comes from being told you don't belong, and flying anyway." The auditorium stayed still for a long moment. Then a voice from the back, unsure but brave, said, "Ghost line." Another cadet echoed it. "Ghost line." And then a third, louder. "Ghost line!" The sound caught fire, not as a chant, but as an awakening. It wasn't hero worship. It was restoration. Later that night, Maya sat alone beneath a parked jet outside the hangar. The same stars she'd once flown under blinked down with calm knowing. Professor Grant sat beside her, sipping coffee, knees popping as she lowered herself onto the concrete. "You did it," she said. "No," Maya replied. "They did. They remembered." Professor Grant smiled, eyes tired but proud. "Call signs fade, systems forget. But stories stay airborne." Maya looked to the stars again, and for once, she didn't feel alone in the sky. Because now, when they whispered ghostline, it wasn't a ghost they spoke of. It was a woman who refused to disappear.